The Battle of Antietam, fought on September 17, 1862, was one of the pivotal moments of the American Civil War. It stands as the single bloodiest day in American military history, with over 22,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or missing in action. The battle marked a critical turning point in the conflict between the Union and Confederate armies. This battle, fought in Maryland, played a significant role in shaping the course of the war, leading to changes in military strategy, political dynamics, and the broader ideological struggle of the Civil War. In the summer of 1862, the Confederate Army, under General Robert E. Lee, was riding high on the successes of previous campaigns in Virginia. After his victories at the Second Battle of Bull Run, also known as Manassas, and the subsequent retreat of Union forces from the south, Lee saw an opportunity to take the war to the north. He aimed to move his army into Maryland, which he believed could undermine northern morale and potentially bring about European recognition of the Confederacy. A Confederate victory on Union soil would also force President Abraham Lincoln to negotiate for peace. Lee's army crossed the Potomac River into Maryland, and Union forces under Major General George B. McClellan were quick to follow. McClellan, often criticized for being overly cautious and slow to act, had spent much of the summer reorganizing and training the Army of the Potomac after its losses in previous engagements. His intelligence network had discovered Lee's movements, and he quickly pursued the Confederate Army, hoping to engage Lee before he could retreat into Virginia. McClellan's advance was hampered, however, when Confederate forces lost a critical piece of intelligence. A copy of Lee's orders, known as Special Order 191, was discovered by Union soldiers, revealing the Confederate Army's disposition and movements. This intelligence gave McClellan a distinct advantage, allowing him to prepare for battle and make tactical decisions based on the information. Despite having this knowledge, McClellan delayed his advance, allowing Lee to establish defensive positions around Sharpsburg, Maryland, near Antietam Creek. The Union Army of the Potomac, commanded by General George B. McClellan, numbered around 87,164 men. The Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, led by General Robert E. Lee, fielded approximately 38,000 soldiers. Although the Union Army had a numerical advantage, McClellan's forces were spread out, and his approach to battle was hesitant. Lee's army was positioned on the defensive, with well-fortified positions along the high ground near Antietam Creek. The Confederates had taken positions along a sunken road, which became famously known as Bloody Lane due to the carnage that took place there. Lee also fortified other key areas, such as the high ground at the Dunker Church, which was a central point in the battlefield. The battle began early in the morning on September 17th, with Union forces launching a series of attacks on Confederate positions. The fighting was intense and brutal from the start. The first major confrontation occurred in the north, where Union forces attacked Confederate positions around the Dunker Church. The fighting here was chaotic, with waves of Union soldiers assaulting entrenched Confederate troops. Despite initial gains, the Union forces were unable to break the Confederate defenses. Meanwhile, in the center of the battlefield, the Union forces launched another series of attacks against Lee's position along a sunken road. This area became the site of the heaviest fighting of the day, and the Confederate forces, despite being vastly outnumbered, managed to hold their ground for hours. The Union soldiers pushed forward, only to be repulsed time and again by Confederate reinforcements, including General A.P. Hill's division, which arrived just in time to save Lee's forces from collapse. In the southern portion of the battlefield, the Union forces attempted to flank Lee's position, hoping to outmaneuver the Confederate army. Here, they encountered stiff resistance from Confederate troops, who held strong defensive positions on the high ground. The fighting was equally fierce, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. As the day wore on, Casualties mounted on both sides. The Union forces, despite having a numerical advantage, were unable to break through Lee's lines. McClellan, despite knowing that Lee was in a vulnerable position, hesitated to press the attack further. This caution, which would become a hallmark of his leadership, meant that the Union forces did not capitalize on their advantage in terms of both numbers and intelligence. By the end of the day, the battle was effectively a draw, with neither side achieving a clear victory. However, the casualties were devastating. The Union Army suffered around 12,401 casualties, while the Confederates lost about 10,316. The staggering loss of life on both sides underscored the brutal nature of the conflict and foreshadowed the immense human cost that would continue throughout the war. In strategic terms, the battle can be considered a Confederate defensive success. Lee's army, although bloodied and battered, had managed to hold its ground and prevent McClellan from breaking through. However, Lee's retreat the following day marked a significant turning point in the war. Though McClellan failed to decisively defeat Lee, the Union's ability to prevent a Confederate victory on northern soil provided a crucial psychological boost for the Union cause. The Battle of Antietam had significant political ramifications, especially in terms of its impact on President Abraham Lincoln's policies. The Union's ability to stop Lee's invasion of the North gave Lincoln the opportunity to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. While the proclamation had been in the works for some time, Lincoln had been waiting for a military victory to announce it, as he feared that doing so after a defeat might appear desperate. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued on September 22, 1862, declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territories were to be set free. While the proclamation did not immediately free any slaves, it fundamentally shifted the goals of the war. What had initially been a war to preserve the Union now became a fight for the abolition of slavery, adding a moral dimension to the conflict that would resonate for generations. It also ensured that European powers, particularly Britain and France, would not intervene on behalf of the Confederacy, as they had long since abolished slavery and would not support a pro-slavery government. The Battle of Antietam remains one of the most studied battles of the American Civil War. Its legacy is multifaceted, shaping not only military tactics and strategy, but also the broader course of the war and the nation's history. In military terms, Antietam demonstrated the limitations of traditional tactics against modern weapons, especially rifled muskets and artillery, which made frontal assaults incredibly costly. The battle also highlighted the importance of intelligence and the ability to capitalize on an opponent's weaknesses, as McClellan's failure to aggressively pursue Lee after receiving detailed intelligence about his movements was a missed opportunity. Politically, Antietam marked the beginning of a shift in the Union's war aims. The issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation was a direct result of the Union's success in halting Lee's invasion, and it set the stage for the eventual abolition of slavery with the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865. On a human level, the battle underscored the devastating impact of the Civil War on American families and communities. With thousands of soldiers killed, wounded or missing, Antietam left a lasting scar on the nation. The battlefield itself became a symbol of sacrifice, and it continues to be a site of reflection and remembrance for those who served and sacrificed during the war. The Battle of Antietam was a defining moment in the American Civil War. While it did not result in a clear victory for either side, it had lasting implications for both the military and political trajectory of the conflict. The Union's ability to stop Lee's invasion of the North gave President Lincoln the political leverage he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which changed the war's objectives and redefined the nation's commitment to ending slavery. Antietam also exposed the devastating human cost of the war, with thousands of casualties and no clear winner. Though the battle was not a decisive military triumph, Its significance in the broader context of the Civil War cannot be overstated, as it set the stage for the eventual Union victory and the end of slavery in the United States. Please like and subscribe for more historical content.